takeaways that you learned from serving on the Seattle School Board?
Ooh, that's a good question. A lot of takeaways, but the biggest takeaway was I proved myself wrong on both assumptions that I had when I ran for the school board. When I ran for the school board, I thought you had to get inside the system to make a difference. And I thought the entity of change was the urban district. And what I subsequently learned is that, yes, you can make a difference in a public education system from the inside, but it's not sustainable. And secondly, I learned that the urban district is not the entity of change. And the reason I came to that conclusion is because subsequent to my tenure on the school board and the tenure of my other colleagues, virtually everything we put in place during our 8 years was removed by subsequent school boards and subsequent superintendents. So the net effect is that I served 8 years on the Seattle School Board to frankly no avail. I would argue that today Seattle Public Schools may be no better than they were in the early 90s, and they well could be worse. And the net effect of all of that is to tell me that, number one, I was wrong on both assumptions, and number two, the entity of change is the state. It is not the district, it's not the school, and it's not the federal government, it's the state. And the reason it's the state is because the state controls most of the money. The state controls who's allowed to teach, who's allowed to lead, who's allowed to be a superintendent. They control testing, they control curriculum, and they control graduation requirements. So if you're going to fix our education system, it has to be done at the state level. And that was the major takeaway. The other thing I've learned is that there's virtually no accountability inside the existing system. There's no accountability for academic achievement. There's no accountability for how money is spent. And quite frankly, they don't know how money is spent. The system of accounting in public education is what I call a financial reporting system as opposed to a management accounting system. And by that I mean the financial control systems of all districts is set up to ensure that they can report back to the state that they spent the dollars given to them by the state exactly as they were supposed to be spent. It also applies to the government, the federal government. They also want to know that the dollars they send to a district are spent exactly the way they're supposed to be spent. It has nothing to do with whether the dollars were effectively spent or whether anything positive came out of those expenditures. That doesn't matter. I used to ask the question, what's it cost us to operate Garfield High School? Well, there's no way they could tell me because they don't keep track of that. They didn't know and they couldn't find out because of the system that they have. So there's no accountability for how money is spent, and then there's no accountability for academic achievement. If you have a failing school, you're really hard pressed to fire the principal, let alone the teachers. And as a consequence, failure can continue. Excellence can also continue, but there's no reward for excellence and there's no punishment for failure. So those are the kinds of things that came out of my experience in the school board. The other thing I learned, quite frankly, is on the school board, the first thing I learned is you need 4 votes. We had a 7-member board and you needed 4 votes to get anything done. It took me a year to get my colleagues to agree to even one of my ideas.